I'm Matt Gilhooly, and this is The Life Shift, candid conversations about the pivotal moments that change lives forever. Hello, my friends. I am here with my friend Melissa. Thank you for joining.
Hi, it's so nice to see you again.
Nice to see you too. So we only know each other through the internet, essentially, right? And back in 2020, at the height of the pandemic, you were running your podcast with one of your friends, and you asked me to be a guest last minute. I think you had a cancellation, to be fair.
Oh, was that what happened? That's so funny. Yeah, we loved having you on the podcast, so it feels so good to be on the other side with you right now.
Yeah, so you guys went on a little hiatus, and we were just talking before recording that you might bring it back. So maybe you can just tell us what it is, just in case it's back when people are ready for it.
Yeah, so my friend Amy and we started a podcast during the peak of the pandemic when everyone was kind of in lockdown and, we were trying to keep ourselves busy and sane as best we could. So we started a podcast called Fill Your Cup. And it was mostly about how to enjoy life during busy, hectic moments and how to take, that self care time that we all need during, the craziness of all of our schedules and always kind of like trying to put yourself first before others. And so we did a lot of great interviews and you were on it as well, of course. So, yeah, we bring it back. We hope you listen.
And even not, I think your episodes are still available to listen to, which can be super helpful. I actually, during the pandemic, early in the pandemic, I think we were all panicking and we weren't quite sure what was happening, what was going to be next. People were worried, not rightfully so. And so at that time, I was taking people's animals and putting them into silly little cartoons, really quick drawings, and trying to, people could donate what they wanted. And so that's what I came on your podcast to talk about, how to, one, bring joy to myself and find some kind of purpose and fill my cup in that way, but also bring a smile to people's faces through those little pieces of art. And that was a fun time until I had to go to the hand doctor because of so many drawings.
You were really doing fantastic with it. It was just so creative of you. And I still have that photo or the cartoon you made of my dog
Aww.
Roxy, who sadly we did have to just put her down, but I will always have that. And I think you brought a lot of just joy to everyone's life with your little character pictures for cute pets and dogs and cats. And it's such a great little thing.
It was fun. It was a season of the pandemic, which turned into coloring books and turned into all these other things.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
now here we are on the Life Shift podcast. And so I appreciate you coming on to tell your story. And I think we're close to 20 episodes now. And it's been out, well, by the time this recording, it's been out for a while, or by the time this is airing, it's been out for a while. But what I'm finding is that we all have such different stories, but there's so many common threads in all the stories, no matter what someone is talking about, whether it's grieving someone that's passed away, whether it's changing careers. So all these things are so interesting. And you have a major pivotal shift, but I imagine with that, there are multiple shifts that came after the fact. So I'm really interested in hearing what you have to say and what we can talk about today. What I like to do is have you just kind of set the scene of kind of what you were doing, what life was like, who you were, those kind of things before that major shift in your life. So maybe you can give us a little backstory.
Yeah, definitely. So before all this, my career of about 13 years now, I was working very hard. I'm a hairstylist. I was working on Broadway shows, and that continued into television and night and day work and just constant working. At the time, I was really enjoying it because I was going after, in a way, I was going after trying to prove myself that I can do this and I'm successful and that's what's going to fulfill me.
Yeah.
And, all of these outside things I think I was searching for
Yeah.
in terms of my happiness. And granted, I was doing very well. I'm still very proud of everything that I've done. But I think my perspective of things changed with the shift that I did have. So before all of this, I was definitely working, 6 days a week with one day off, and on my days off, I would do the laundry and catch up on life. So my personal life wasn't really there. So I think, yeah, before my shift, that was sort of my life in a nutshell. What was going on?
Do you feel you mentioned that you were trying to prove yourself? Do you think that you were trying to prove yourself to others or to society that you were successful, or do you think that was trying to prove something to yourself?
I think it may have been both. I think it was to people around me. I grew up an only child.
Me
I
too.
kind of navigated. Yes, I think we had that in common. I was navigating things on my own. I have a wonderful family, of course, but you know, I definitely was the child that needed to find my way. I didn't have that older sibling to push me around or, tell me, kind of have guidance,
Yeah.
let's say. So I felt lacked that, a little bit. And I knew that going to college wasn't something I was too interested in. I was a very creative kid growing up. And yeah, I think that's sort of where it all began, is that everybody else around me was like going to college and had nursing degrees and all these other things, and I never felt good enough. But I was like, you know what, I'm going to prove to everyone that working in a little theater in Connecticut where I started is going to bring me to what I want. I think there was a lot of doubts going around me that, like, well, you're not going to make the money you want and you're not going to really succeed. So I needed to prove myself, and I think that's where that was coming from.
Well, and I think a lot, and in our generation, and well, we might be in a little bit different generation, but I think the typical route was always, you graduate high school, then you go to college because that's the only way to be successful. So it kind of makes sense that as a creative that knew that college wasn't really the place you wanted to be, that you felt the need that, look, I'm going to do this and I'm going to show you
Right.
what I can do. And you did. You
And
did.
I did. Yeah. And I felt like that is sort of what I wanted to do. And I have always been the type to take the road less traveled, let's say. And I did that. So,
No,
yeah.
it was, I mean, honestly, when we first met on your podcast and then connecting on social media and like just doing that kind of like scroll back and seeing all the cool things that you had been a part of up until that point, which probably shifted a lot when the lockdowns happened and Broadway shut down and you weren't able to do hair and wig styling and all these things that just like brought you that joy, right? So that was like a mini shift in itself of like forcing you into that. Whew,
Yeah,
that's a lot.
I know. It was a bit of a mini shift, but I also felt a bit of a blessing in disguise because, and I'm sure a lot of people can relate, it's just, it gave me that extra push to kind of pivot in a different direction as well. Yeah.
So before your major shift, which we'll talk about in just a second, you were working 6 days a week. You were, you know, getting home late probably. And so it was just a busy time. So what was the moment that really changed your life forever?
I think I was working on Broadway at this point for 6 or 7 years. And it was right around Christmas time. And I got a very random call the day before Christmas Eve that my dad had passed away. That was the shift for sure
Yeah.
in my life. As I said, I am the only child, which made it harder because it is hard to share emotions with anybody or have anyone else really understand what you're going through. So I remember I was in an Uber. It was on the 23rd of December. I had all of my presents wrapped for Christmas and ready to come home. And, my mom was ready to pick me up at the train station. So I was in an Uber on my way to Grand Central. And I see a random number calling my phone. And at this point, I was like, oh God, who's calling me now? Because, you just get all those spams and all that crazy stuff. So, anyway, I answer the phone. And on the other end, it happened to be the hospital in a town near where I grew up in Connecticut. I'll never forget the phone call. I remember on the other end, they said, hi, is this Melissa? And I said, yes, who is this? And he said, this is Dr. Groin calling from Bridgeport Hospital. I remembered his name for some reason. We have your father here. And I said, at that point, I'm like a little shaky, what's going on? Why isn't my dad calling me, And he said, well, has he been sick lately? And I said, no, not to my knowledge. What's going on? And he said, okay, well, I just wanted to let you know that he has passed away. He was found at work this morning at like 6 a.m. And we have him here. And I'm so sorry to tell you this a couple days before Christmas, but you can come here. He's in the morgue right now. And, my brain is going, it's like you get all this information. You're like, what do you do with all of that? It's just shock.
Right.
For
And you're
sure.
not in a safe space. You're in an Uber, which is,
Yeah,
not in a safe mental space in like a home that you're familiar with. You're in a foreign space.
exactly. And the Uber driver, of course, is hearing this entire conversation he can tell of the mood shift of
Right.
like, ooh, that wasn't a good phone call. So I said to the doctor on the other end that, I'm not even in Connecticut right now. I'm on my way to Grand Central. I'm in Manhattan. I'll get there as soon as I can. So at this point, we hung up and you're just completely in shock. Like
Right.
either you go either way. Like it's sort of like, do I just like break down and like freak out, which is obviously okay to do. But at that point, I knew that, like you said, I was not in a safe space. I knew that I had to get out of the Uber, get to Grand Central, and get a ticket, get on the train. So in my mind, all I could process was I have to get to the train, get the ticket, get on the train. That's all I could process. I finally get to Grand Central, and the first person I called was my mom. They have been divorced for a while, so she was still very upset. But I called her and I said, "Mom, I have to tell you something. Daddy just passed away." And she was like, "What? Like your father?" And I said, "Yes." So she was very upset. At that point, I still couldn't let myself like just break down. I still had to get on that train.
Yeah.
So, we kind of ended that call. I got my ticket, got on the train, and of course, it was winter time. I had my big heavy coat on, and I just put that big hood over my head and kind of just like sat in the corner, and just tears like started flowing because I was finally just like on the train. And that's when all the phone calls started coming in, and it's just very overwhelming, all of it, in that moment. Yeah, that was basically everything that happened that day when he passed unexpectedly.
Yeah. And everything just in that moment, that phone call, you picking it up, your entire life like shattered into pieces.
Yeah,
Were you really
yeah.
close with your father?
Towards the end, we were getting closer.
Yeah.
So I do have no regrets on the closure that I had, or, the closure that I like to think we had. But yes,
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, I can picture, I feel like that moment in the train with you with your hood on was like this moment of not knowing what's like, what do I do now? Right? Because
Hmm.
suddenly that person that you were able to call whenever you needed to or wanted to, you can no longer do that.
Yep.
All the memories that could be start flooding, right? And these pieces. The interesting thing to me is, or what stood out to me in that is the fact that you had to call your mother and tell her that in the state that you were in, probably in a more matter of fact kind of state rather than a
Yes. Yeah.
complete. Do you think back on that moment? Was that phone call something that sticks out to you?
I'll always remember where I was standing. I still go through Grand Central and I still think of like, well, that phone call I made to my mom. I think for any tragic moment that people have, like the whole world does kind of stop
Yeah.
and you're just, it's a moment of, yeah, you're in your own world. And calling my mom, it was difficult because I felt I didn't have a choice but to be the strong one because I knew that I had to get home. That was my one duty.
Do you feel that, because you just said it, you said I had to be the strong one. Did that persist, or were you able to kind of start your grief journey at some point shortly after that? Like, or did you, I feel like when my mom died when I was a kid, I know that feeling of having to be the strong one, even though I was only 8.
Yeah.
It was
Yeah.
like, it was almost like you're, I'm not going to college. I'm going to prove you wrong, in the same
Yeah.
sense of that 8-year-old's going to be screwed up for life. And my job was to be the strong one, proving to them, not that they need it, that I was going to be the strong one. So that's kind of where that question comes from. Were you able to allow yourself to not be the strong one?
Oh my gosh. Yeah. So I do feel my entire life I had to be the strong one.
Okay.
I've been through a lot of other things personally. I mean, not me personally, but around me. Like my mother had a moment where she had a mental breakdown, and I had to be there for her as well. And it's a miracle of how amazing she's doing now. So I do feel I've always been in that situation of being the strong one.
Mm-hmm.
I think the pivotal shift was part of it was definitely allowing myself to grieve. There was a moment of a few months. I think I had a month off of work and I had to get back to a new position. I was starting on another Broadway show. After I took a month off, I had to start that show, and it was still not the time I started grieving yet. So I was still like trying to be strong. And when you're working on Broadway or, in theater, in the position that I'm in as a hairstylist, I mean, you're always sort of like there for other people. They sit in your chair and you're their therapist and they open up to you. And that's sort of just the dynamic of the job as well. So I remember going back, I would hear people complaining, and it was just complaining about small things like, oh, I'm so upset that I have to be in work so early tomorrow, or I'm upset that this person said this to me. And I'm just like,
Right.
all of those little things in life, you have in the back of your mind, like, gosh, I just went through like this huge trauma and
Right.
I'm listening to you be upset about this tiny thing in life where it's like, I realized that, yeah, those little things don't matter,
No.
and our perspectives on life, sometimes needs to change a little bit in that sense.
Do you feel that before your father passed, that those little things were things that you would complain about?
Yeah, I think they were. I
Yeah.
think they were.
And then you just realize, like, none of this
Yeah.
matters.
No. I realized in that moment that life is just way too short. and we deserve to do things that make us happy. I thought that all of the success that I was having was making me happy, but in the end, it wasn't fulfilling me authentically.
Right.
And so when he passed, I realized, like, gosh, this can happen to me. This can happen to anybody. Like, we could be here now and an hour not here. And it's so true, So it made me appreciate life much more. It made me not want to hustle after that, like, what I thought was the glamour and success of entertainment and Broadway and all that. So yeah, I did make a shift. It took me a couple years, but I did make the shift.
When was the moment you allowed yourself to start your grieving process, and what did that look like for you?
Yeah, so speaking of allowing myself to, not be the strong one, it took maybe 5 or 6 months afterwards to just kind of say, like, I can't keep working like this. The only thing I felt that was going to help me was to just get away from it all. It sounds like the hardest thing, but for me, it's like, that's what I felt would help me grieve, is just to put everything aside, get away from everybody, and just be with myself.
Yep.
And that was my biggest help with my grief. I ended up traveling. It took a couple years, and I solo traveled. I took that time to go to London, which I fell in love with and made many friends there. I traveled within that time to, like, Ireland. I visited family that I've never met in Italy. Where else? France, all the good stuff. And I did it all on my own. And it brought me back to myself of what made me happy. And I had to reevaluate that. And I think that's what allowed me to, bring my guard down a little bit.
Yeah. You had your own kind of eat, pray, love experience.
Yeah. Yeah.
You were living that.
I've heard that many times.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, it's true. If you've ever read the book or seen the movie, you had pieces of that, it sounds like. I mean, I think the hustle and bustle of what you were doing was a good mask, right? For a while. It allowed you to block out whatever, was bubbling up at the surface. And really the only solution was to literally stop it all, quiet the space.
Yeah.
And just be one with yourself and explore things that kind of, quote unquote, fill your cup, right?
Exactly. Mm-hmm.
Did you have, and this is kind of a selfish question, but did you have a moment, like an emotional moment that triggered that for you? Like a breakdown or something like major that was new to you, that was like, this is my kick in the pants? To just quit Broadway or to, just kind of go off? And the reason I ask this is, in my own grief journey, my mom died when I was 8, and then I didn't have my first, what I would say, major shift in the grief journey until I was about 16, when I had like a breakdown, like walls came shattering down. So I'm wondering if something like that happened, that was like, look, I got to leave all this behind. I have to be with myself.
So there was, I think it added up to multiple things, but one specific thing, and I hate to speak this way, but this was my experience working in the entertainment industry, where you feel very much like, I probably shouldn't say this, but with actors in general, they have a duty to themselves that, it is all about them, for sure. I mean, they have to know their lines. They have to be on it. They're very much priority put first. And sometimes that begins to transfer onto how they see life, where it does become all about them. They don't really care about you. Like that I'm sorry, but that was my experience. And
I mean, to be fair, that was my experience doing theater in high school. And one of the reasons
Yeah.
that I quit doing it is because for some reason, as a teenager, I had self awareness enough to realize I was becoming that person. So I get it.
Yeah. Okay, exactly. So I felt I was living a very egotistical life and a
Yeah.
very egotistical world.
Did you feel that you were getting that way? Do you think that was coming across like in
Yeah,
your
I
work?
think so.
Yeah.
I think so. And that's just not who I wanted to be.
Right.
It's not what I wanted to be around either. So there was a moment where God, I'll never forget it. I was sitting in a trailer. I was doing a TV show, and one of the actors came in, and I'm just overhearing their situation and what's going on. And again, my dad had just passed a few months earlier, and I'm listening to the conversation between the actor and one of the hairstylists. And I'm listening to this conversation, and it was just very much one sided by the actor. Like, we ask them, how are you doing? And they're kind of like, oh, this, and this, and I'm great, or I'm bad. And there was not one time where she asked the hairstylist, how are you doing today? And the thing is that that's just the world, and that's how it is, in the industry. And that moment, I was just so upset for that circumstance.
Yeah.
Like, it's just like, I'm thinking in my mind, my father just passed away. There's, starving people in the world. There's all these things going on. And, it brought me back to, it was a very egotistical way.
It's so interesting how, like, I mean, on any other day, that conversation probably wouldn't have
Yeah,
necessarily rocked your world, right? But that one day, it just hit, I mean, honestly, hit in the right way, right? Because it led you to go, okay, it's time. It's time for
you're
me
right.
to take care of myself, take care of my mental health, find my purpose again, or, what my new purpose is in this new version of my life without my father. What did you learn by your solo trips? Like, what did you learn about yourself? What was that like?
Yeah. So I know that for years and years, all I knew was working, being around other people, hustling, all this stuff. So it was the first time ever that I removed myself from all of that and just kind of got to know me. I got to know myself, which was, I never did that before.
Was it scary at first?
I was very nervous. But the first time I flew by myself to another country, it was very scary. But when I landed, I met my friends there, and it ended up completely changing my life, like, for sure. I just needed that little push. And I mean, my life definitely changed because of that as well.
What aspects of your life do you feel changed from that trip or from those trips?
I've always been independent, but I do think it made me even more independent. It made me more confident within myself. It made me feel that anybody in my life, I, I want people in my life who make my life better. I don't want people around me that feels like a thorn in my side or aren't adding to my life. And I think that's what I learned the most.
Yeah. Is that to cultivate the right relationships and not, because I mean, I think growing up, we're always, you can't, you got to connect with everyone and listen to
Right.
everyone. And someone's bringing all this toxic pieces. And I'm sure in the entertainment industry, there's lots of toxicity that just permeates in some instances. But you were probably like, ha ha ha, they're in your chair, as you're doing that.
And you don't realize it until I use the word remove, because when you don't remove yourself
Yeah.
from something, you'll never see like a different perspective on it. And as soon as I did it, I was like, you know what? It's a wonderful career. It's everything I was doing. I'm so grateful for. But when I removed myself, I knew it wasn't where I saw myself in 5 to 10 years. So yeah, that helped a lot.
Yeah. So when you said you traveled for a couple years, was that constantly or off and on?
Off and on,
Okay.
yeah. I would go away for like a couple months and then I'd come back and then I'd do another show for a few months and then I'd leave again. So it was one of those things. And finally, then it leads up to the pandemic time where everything was shut down, and I know everybody else, I'm sure, has had very similar, circumstances too.
I don't
And
know.
that,
New York had probably one of the bigger shutdowns than everywhere else. I mean, if you're talking Florida, we were only shut down for like 4 weeks.
oh yeah, I know. Yeah. Oh man. Yeah. That must have been a whole other, yeah.
But like you said earlier too, you said the pandemic was really a blessing in disguise for you, right? And honestly, in a lot of these conversations, I find myself saying to the guests that yes, the pandemic has been horrible for so many people in so many ways, but for so many people, it gave them the opportunity to slow down and figure out like what's next, where am I going, what serves me the
Oh
most.
my gosh, completely.
So that happened to you.
Yeah. I have to say, I think that it's important for everyone to do this and look at their life as a whole, and see the different perspective. If there's something that you're unhappy about, there's always a way to change it. You can always recreate your life. And I've definitely recreated mine, and it's possible.
So what changed for you?
Yeah, so I knew that I wanted a personal life. I knew that working so hard didn't give me that. Dating was very hard, like very very hard.
Before or during the
Before,
pandemic?
well, exactly, yeah, both. Working the amount of time that I did, dating was hard. Having a personal life was hard. I didn't get to see my family a lot. So with the passing of my dad, it also reminded me of, I want to spend time with my family, and this isn't allowing, like, my happiness is more important than my work right now. So the pandemic happened, and I decided towards the end, it was just last year. I decided that I wanted to get out of the city. I needed a shift, and I moved back home to Connecticut, and I have still never looked back. I'm so happy for the decision I made. I still have my apartment in New York City, but it is being rented out, so that's great. But I was able to come back home to a rural area.
Yeah, totally different.
Yeah, I am now getting into real estate. So that gives me the flexibility I've realized I've wanted. And I've met this wonderful new guy, my boyfriend. Everything that I wanted, it took some time. It took a lot of thought. It took a couple years to figure it all out, but I am finally getting there. And that was the shift that sort of happened.
Do you feel that you are a totally different person than you were sitting in that Uber before that phone call happened?
Wow, yeah, I do.
Is it weird to look back?
It is. I still tell that story, and it still brings me back to that time. It's been like 5 years now, but
Yeah.
I think that stuff always stays with you. You get stronger, of course, from it. I'm sure you agree, and you've been through at such a young age, you've been through a lot.
It's totally different though. I mean, we have similar, actual stories of losing a parent,
Yeah.
but that's what I love about the Life Shift podcast is that people are telling their stories and I can relate in so many ways, even though the situation is so different, right?
Mm-hmm. You're so right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I love that. I think my favorite part of all of this for you was how you approached grief and what you chose to do. Because I think that in our society, maybe pre-pandemic more so than now, people were very afraid, right?
Mm.
To say goodbye, like
Yes.
remove yourself from whatever is not serving you, because we were conditioned to say, I mean, you probably felt this in the entertainment industry. You get a job and you're like, well, that's not a big enough show. Like, I want this next show. It's not good enough. I got to get, this Netflix series, and I have to, right? And you always just feel like wherever you are is just not good. Do you find yourself now content in the spaces that you're in?
Yeah. I think I still find, I think just from reminiscence of always trying to be the best and perfect, which is just a whole other, we don't, that's not the greatest way to live. I'm learning to live more so in the moment and be grateful every day for what you have. I do a lot of journaling. Actually, I haven't done it in a little bit of time, but journaling has always helped me kind of, see the bigger picture of my life, what's going on right now. Like, look how far you've come from last month, even, or, last year. Just writing things out of saying like what you're grateful for. Like, there's so many things that we all have,
Oh, we don't take enough time.
we don't take enough time to just realize it and know how lucky we really are.
No, I mean, I hate that this was your trigger, but
Yeah.
thinking about it, I'm sure your family is super proud of where you are now. And funny enough, that earlier version of you that felt you need to prove everything, right, is probably, this version of you is probably making people even more happy to see where you are, to see that you've proved that you found your authentic space, right?
Yes. Yeah. Absolutely. Yeah. It's scary, but it to take that plunge, it's so worth it.
What do you love about what's your favorite part about your new life?
Oh my gosh, I love the flexibility. I love having friends. I love seeing my family, and also working and making a living at the same time. I love feeling free. I wasn't very free.
Yeah, because
Yeah.
you're kind of curating your own life now instead of people
Yeah.
dictating what you do next. And you are still dabbling a little in the hair scene, right? And you're doing it on your own terms.
Yes, and you know what? Kind of the good thing that came out of it was because I've worked so long and the reputation has been pretty solid for me. I'm still getting calls and I'm able to do it not full time anymore. So I will take a couple calls during the month, go to the city and work on set a couple days, which is great. And I love that I'm able to do that too.
Do you find more joy in doing it now that you can choose, you can pick and choose and say no if you want to?
Definitely. I think that was my personality of like being a free spirit. Like, I always felt so trapped,
Yeah.
going to the theater every single day, seeing the same people every single day. So I'm happy, yeah, to do that.
Do you find yourself more creative now that you're not forced to do it all the time?
Yeah, I do. I think we all need that break too. I think you become more creative too when you fill your cup, like we say, fill your cup first. You have to take care of yourself first to show up authentically to others. So yeah. Mhm.
Well, I like to kind of end with a question that is not really answerable because, why not? But I like to ask, if you could say something to the Melissa that just picked up her Uber before you got that call, is there something that you would want to say to her, whether she would listen or not?
You don't have to take life so seriously. I think being a perfectionist has been definitely at the top of my list sometimes. And, you know, don't overthink too much. I think I would say to myself, because life is too short, enjoy the moments, enjoy the little moments. Yeah.
Yeah. If only we could go back and tell ourselves, our earlier versions, some things that would be helpful. But you know what? Sometimes we have to go through these really hard moments to get to the place that really helps us realize like what we really are meant to do.
Absolutely. I think you doing this podcast is seriously amazing, because I think every person has their story to tell. Like, everyone has been through something. And yes, it's like, it's just the most awful thing, but through it, you you grow from it, you're stronger, you look at life differently, and that's what we need sometimes.
And you know what? And two, I think there are other Melissas out there that are running themselves into the ground for what they believe is what they want to do to prove
Right.
themselves to other people. And hopefully that other person hears an episode from this podcast that resonates with them, right? And it's like, you know what? I'm not the only one feeling this way. Maybe if I
Exactly.
make little changes, I don't need this big giant, pivotal moment that shifts my whole life. Maybe I can just start to like seek out things that matter to me and that,
100%.
allow me to be authentically me.
Exactly. Exactly.
Well, I appreciate that you shared your life shift with us because I think it's going to help other people. I know many people, I'm one of them, that has lost a parent suddenly, and it really is an explosion. It's a shattering
Yeah.
of what you knew, right? And now you
Yeah.
got to figure out what that new plan is. And I think that your story after the fact, there's something that we can learn from it.
Yeah. Thank you. And just thank you so much. It's great for me on the other side just to have this space to share the story and tell the story. So thank you.
Well, I appreciate it. And I hope that someday we'll both be in Manhattan at the same time
Exactly.
and we can
I
meet
hope
up.
so too. We've been missing each other. I know you were there for your birthday.
I sure was. And we had a good time. But maybe if you keep your apartment and it's not rented out next time I go, I might rent it out from you.
Absolutely. I hope to see you for sure.
Yes. Well, thank you for being a part of the Life Shift podcast. I appreciate you, my friend.
I appreciate you. Thank you.
I'm Matt Gilhooly, and this is The Life Shift, candid conversations about the pivotal moments that change lives forever. Please subscribe to the show on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you listen to your favorite podcasts. For more information about how you can support the Life Shift podcast, please visit www.thelifeshiftpodcast.com. See you next time.